All right, guys, in today's video, we're going to be chasing down a performance problem with the air conditioning system on this 2004 Chevrolet Cavalier. It's still functioning, but it's really performing poorly, so we have a refrigerant leak somewhere, and I'll take you through how we go about locating that type of problem and then repairing it. My go-to method to start with is visual inspection, and we'll be using a UV light and glasses to look along each of the fittings and where the hoses come together with rubber and metal, as well as further down here, I'll show you in a minute, where you have fittings that are metal on metal. And we'll use this to look for signs of dye that would indicate where the refrigerant is seeping out from one of those places. I've given you guys a yellow lens filter to give the same effect of accentuating this color as I have with the goggles. You see we come over with this UV light, and what we're looking for is this kind of green color. So this green color is indicative of some of the oil and the refrigerant escaping through this low pressure port. Probably not the problem, but a problem. And as you can see, normally when we go along these lines, it just stays blue. And that's what we're looking for. That's normal. So we're just going to keep going all along here and look for signs of green like we see on this cap. In fact, if we were to remove this cap, we would probably see some discoloration inside the port as well. Not much, but some. This is just normal leakage for these service ports. That's not what we're mostly after here. We're after something bigger. All right, guys, it didn't take long to hone in on what is likely the source of the leak that we're concerned with here. We can see one of these lines that goes into the compressor has a lot of oily residue on it with some dirt and debris, and if we put our UV light on it, we can see this is all green. This is all fluorescing, very dark green along this bottom edge, all the way down towards the compressor, and there's even some overspray on this coolant hose, this radiator hose here. So I believe this is our culprit. We're going to have to get some better access to confirm that, so let me take you back and show you how we get better access. All right, this plastic cover here we need to get off so we can get in here and see better. This is also important because it tells you what the refrigerant charge should be normally. We can see down here, I can zoom you guys in later, but it's 1.5 pounds of R134A. To get this off, let's see if we can zoom in here. Pick one of these over here towards the side. What you can see is it's like a little push pin type connector. You need a tool like this to raise up the center. And then once the center is raised up, you can pull up the bottom. Just like that. So we're going to have to take all of these out, and then we can get this panel removed. All right, there's 6 of those little clips. Once they're all removed, there's a piece that tucks in under the fender on either side. Just untuck it from underneath the fender, and this piece just comes right out. All right, with that out of the way, we've got good access right up under here, and what we're mostly looking at is right in this center of the frame area. We're going to need to be able to remove this fastener here in order to separate this hose from the condenser. Getting this access also allowed us to double check that there's no leaks on the condenser, and we've been able to go across the rest of the system under the hood here and verify we have no other visual inspection sign of leaks. So I think that we'll start with this hose. It's possible we have something else perhaps inside like the evaporator, but this hose is likely the problem. The other area that we're going to have to get access to is in the back. So right here in the back by the accumulator, we're going to need to be able to remove this fitting that you see right there in the center of the screen. And then we're going to need to get access to the compressor. So we're going to need to get the vehicle lifted up, either on a lift or on ramps, and those are the 3 connections we're going to need to remove. But first, after we get it up, lifted up to verify we have access to the compressor, we're going to need to evacuate the residual refrigerant out of the system before we can service it. All right, hooking up the low line for the recovery machine is pretty straightforward, but it's a real pisser to get to the high because it's mounted right underneath this frame bracing as part of this pipe that's leaking. So be prepared for a real tight fit to get your hand in there upside down and get that high fitting to snap on correctly. All right, guys, we're just pulling a vacuum after having recovered the refrigerant that we got. Out of the 1.5 pounds that were supposed to be in here, we got 0.9. So we caught this pretty early, so we won't have to replace any other components but the leaking pipe. All right, guys, I was just getting ready to remove this hose assembly when I noticed this problem down here. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but these guys have been rubbing together. Now, it's not leaking on either one of them yet that I can tell. You can see it's taken a substantial amount of the aluminum off of here just from rubbing. So we're going to definitely want to do an extended vacuum test to make sure this isn't leaking. And we're going to want to try to bend this line that runs over to where the orifice tube is. We're going to want to bend that out of the way to kind of cut down on this. This is just 21 years of rubbing. That's what's happened. All right, guys, the part we're going to be replacing this with is an AC Delco 15-31849 or a GM 2266-1210. That's unique to these J-body cars. It's still available, unlike many other parts that you might find that are discontinued. And this should be the whole enchilada. With the seals and everything ready to go. So yes, so you got a new high side valve and cover. You got seals underneath this protective piece here that goes into the condenser. We've got a new low pressure valve, but they didn't give us a new cap, but we still have our old one. And then we've got a seal that goes to the accumulator, double seal. All right, so this is basically a ready to go thing. The only thing we have to provide ourselves is a replacement cap, and then we're going to have to transfer into this fitting the pressure sensor that's attached there. We can do all that once we remove the old one. So you can see what you've got here is this piece attaches to the condenser, this piece attaches to the accumulator, and then this larger piece is why you have to get it up on a lift. This attaches to the compressor. So it's not a big deal to remove. So let's go ahead and start removing the old one. All right, this stud over here has seen better days. So we're going to go ahead and dry to see if we can get anything to soak into that. It's a 13 millimeter fastener. We'll see if we can get 1/4 inch hardware to fit down here. Otherwise, we might have to just use an open end wrench. All right, we lucked out. All right, so that fastener is okay to reuse. Hopefully that stud's not too bad. Let's move on to the other side now. Okay, we've got a 15 millimeter holding this brace. So we just need to get this guy off. This guy is not corroded, so we did not give him any penetrating oil. Now, if you have cruise control, like this vehicle, we're going to have to remove this 13 as well in order to be able to get this bracket off this stud. Let's get this guy just to make sure we're able to move what we need to move when we need to move it. Okay, now we got to come over here and get the accumulator fitting. All right, the two fittings here, the fitting on the accumulator looks like a 28 millimeter. Cannot locate the 28 millimeter wrench, so we're going to have to use an adjustable. And the fitting on the hose itself is a 32. Again, don't see any significant corrosion here, so we should be okay getting this to let go. Yep. All right, now we're going to go down and get the one on the compressor. All right, from underneath the bottom, we're going to reach up here and disconnect the sensor connector right here. It's connecting to a, right here is the port where that plugs into, and there's the high side of the hose. And then right here is our last fastener on the compressor. So I'm going to come in from top. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get you guys to see because there's going to be a lot of glare from the sun, but we'll give it a shot. Can't really come down from the top. Let's see if we have any clearance to come down here. Tight, tight fit. All right, let's see if we can get in here with a wrench. All right, this little stubby looks like he might do the trick. Might not have enough leverage with him. Might just start off with a regular size one first. There we go. Sorry, guys, I have no way not to block your view at this point. Can't really get anything in where I can't block your view. If we can improve our lighting situation a little bit. All right. Now, maybe. Nope, still don't have any room really to get a wrench in here. Let's see if I can get it with this guy. So this is just like a round palm type ratcheting wrench. You guys are in my way big time, guys. I need to be right where the camera is to get any leverage on this thing. Let me see if I can reposition you guys. All right. Nope, still can't get any leverage on this. Real pisser. I mean, it's coming out. It's just really tight, so I'm imagining there's some corrosion. And it's obviously a really long fastener. Even near the end here, it's a lot of resistance. Let's try again with this. Yeah, finally we can get the ratchet to turn it. All right. That was the hardest part of the whole thing. All right. So that's going to come off real easy. Let's go up the top and pull it out. All right, to get this guy separated up here, I'm just going to do a few taps with a brass punch and a brass hammer till it lets go of the seal on the other side. All right, another pisser is getting the top fitting out. You can see that you've got this coolant overflow hose here, and then we've got the radiator hose here. And we've got to work this block with the stud out between these guys. So you can compress the hose in order to give yourself some slack. And what you're going to find, like I just found, is the next thing you're going to have is that the dipstick's in the way. All right, so, you know, it's never easy with GM. All right, what I found you're going to have to do is pull this pipe up more by orienting the compressor piece so that you can twist this. Then we can get it out and away from these hoses. Just barely. Christ. There we go. All right. That's the hardest part of the whole thing. All right, and then what I would say is we'll go ahead and work this back down now. We can pull this down, and then we can run this down, paying attention to how it's routed between these hoses. All right, you're going to pull this hose assembly down from underneath the belly, and the one thing we need to salvage off of it is this pressure sensor. You could elect to get a new one. I'll put the number in the description along with this assembly, but we're going to try to see if we can get this one off. It's a 14 millimeter fitting on here, but sometimes they can have some dissimilar metal corrosion, but this time we lucked out. All right, there's an old O-ring in there. So that's good to go. We'll transfer this over to the new one. So that's going to go right where this cover is. There's already an O-ring there. Now what I'm going to probably do is put a little bit of PAG oil on this O-ring so it doesn't tear going on. So let me go get some of that. All right, we're going to use some of this AC Delco refrigerant oil. 15118 is the AC Delco number. 1235 6151 is the GM number. We're just going to take a little bit where we're going to be putting this sensor on. And with a clean finger, which I just cleaned, work that around, and then slowly work this guy on. Finger tight, and then we'll go look in the service manual and see if there is a particular torque. All right, so guys, I'm realizing in that previous clip that we didn't have these guys in the frame. So let me show you again using pieces of the old pipe. So on each of these, we're going to want to lubricate these seals with some PAG oil. I'm just going to start with a little bit to begin with, and then we're just going to work that around the seals of the new hose on each of these ends, right? So we're going to end up putting pag oil for this particular end that goes in the accumulator. We're going to end up putting some more in the female end because it's very difficult to get both of these seals. This is a double seal type design. It's very difficult to get both of these to fit in without sufficient lubricant. So that's what I was trying to show you on this view. And then if we switch over to the other one, right, what I was trying to show you on this guy is very similarly where we're going to install the pressure sensor. Same thing, right? You're going to come down here, just going to come down and put a drop of pag oil on that seal and smear it around so that that sensor goes on nice and easy. And then similarly, again, this is the old pipe. We would end up doing the same thing on this seal here that goes into the condenser. So that was the piece I was trying to show you, along with installing this particular sensor on this connector that got cut off of the frame in the previous clip. All right, guys, let's take a quick look at the service manual to get our torque values to finish buttoning this particular repair up. So we're going to go to the section I've got here on the compressor hose assembly replacement. We're going to go down to the installation section. And if we zoom in here, we can get all these values, right? So the first one we're concerned with is the install of the hose assembly and fitting nut to the accumulator, right? So that's in the picture over to the side here, right there. And that's what we're talking about, going from the hose all the way up to the accumulator. And what they're going to tell us here is that that fitting nut should be torqued to 26 foot-pounds. That one's a real pisser to get on, too. You make sure you have plenty of pag oil on those two seals. And then if we keep moving down here, we can see the next one they talk to us about is the fitting nut for the compressor hose to the condenser up on the top left on the passenger side. That guy, that 13 millimeter nut gets to 12 foot-pounds. The next one they're going to talk about is the nut that's holding the compressor hose assembly to the compressor. Right? This can be a nut. It can also be a bolt, but regardless, it's going to be 12 foot-pounds. And then the last one they're going to talk about is down here. There's a couple of bolts. There's a 15 millimeter bolt, and there's a I think it was a 13 related to the cruise control bracket. And those bracket bolts, those nuts rather, both of them are going to go to 89 inch-pounds in both positions. All right, guys, coming in from the bottom, we can see that we've got the compressor hose assembly remounted to the compressor. We can start this nut by hand. You got to get these two nipples on either side and the seal lined up pretty well and seated before you start cranking down on this guy. And this one gets torqued down to 12 foot-pounds. It's just a massive amount of glare at the moment, guys. But then on this nut, this 13 that we're going to put down on the stud to connect it up to the condenser, this one, again, you want to get it lined up with the bottom nipple, get it right in line with the seal, and then you can get enough threads to use the nut to drive it home. What I actually found out here is it's useful to get like a small pry bar back in this crevice here, and I know this glare is just really crazy. The flashlight's flashing also, but I got my finger on that hose right here. Little pry bar behind there to give you a little bit of forward push while you work to get enough threads to get this nut going. That's the trick to getting this one tightened down. And again, 12 foot-pounds here. Okay, on this side, this 15, this is the one that's 89 inch-pounds. And then again over here, if you have the cruise control, this bracket, this 13 here is also 89 inch-pounds. All right in the back with the accumulator, this guy was the hardest one. You've got to get this thing perfectly lined up or it won't be able to go in. So if it's lined up, the first seal will go in if you got enough lubrication on it with pag oil, but then the second seal won't get in far enough. You've got to get the second seal to be right level with the threads before you can start to take the fitting nut and get it to go. Otherwise, you run the risk of stripping this out because you're dealing with aluminum here. If you get it done right and it starts to thread on by hand, then you're good to crank it down. And again, this was 26 foot-pounds of torque when you're done. All right, with our little front cover reinstalled here, we can see our charge right down here is 1.5 pounds, 0.68 kilograms, depending on the equipment you're using. This is the amount of R134A refrigerant that we're going to need to put back in the system. All right, guys, It's very critical to have a gauge set for this last step. We're going to need to pull a vacuum on the system. We're going to want to draw it down to 30 inches of mercury, and we're going to want to let that vacuum pump run for 30 minutes doing that particular level of vacuum. That's going to boil off any moisture that crept into the system while we were doing the repair. And then after we get done with running this guy for 30 minutes and pulling that vacuum, we're going to let it sit for 30 minutes, and we're going to ensure that it holds. And that's going to let us know that there are no more leaks. It's possible that the piece we replaced was just one of several leaks. Pretty sure it's just this one, but you got to do a test like that to verify. All right, guys, we got everything buttoned back up. We've got it charged. We've done a test. We're not leaking. We're holding our 1.5 pound charge. So we're going to give it back to the owner and let them see how it performs. It's always possible we have something else wrong, but we've fixed the leak. I hope you found this video useful for how to fix this type of hose, or rather fix this type of leaking hose in a Chevrolet Cavalier or a Pontiac Sunfire. If this did help you save money and maintain these J-Car body vehicles, I'd appreciate you paying it forward by hitting that like button. And as always, thanks for watching.